I'm here because I, as a journalist for Forbes and for other publications, cover high luxury jewelry, one-of-a-kind jewels, important gemstones, and I've actually been to Leo's studio in Regent Street, London, which is a vast windowless space where he creates the most beautiful environments for his photographs that show jewels and all types of finished jewelry to, how shall I put it? But he creates environments in these images that you want to like move into and live inside of. So he's been in the trade for what, 18 years? You've been professional
like
photographer. And so there you go. Start off and tell us, why is it so deeply important that you have ultra compelling images?
I think images come second to the jewelry. So you have the jewelry, you have the piece, and then the second most important part of being a brand or selling a product has to be the imagery. In jewelry, it's the most interesting, purely because it's something that doesn't transport. You want to show someone your product, it's of high value, it's very intricate, it's very delicate. You need to have a representation of that product, which makes you go, wow, that is amazing. What is it? What is it made of? How was it made? I want it. What does it feel like? And images are the best way of doing that. I can't think of another thing, purely because images capture attention. You can create an environment, you can create a sensation, you can create a feeling with an image, which with video I don't think you can do, and with pure text I don't think you can do. Photography also gives you that ability to transport a piece to anywhere or any point of anyone's imagination. And it is a great joy that I get to do this from Regent Street, which is where Carl said I work. To go back to me a little bit, I work in my studio. It is underground, there are no windows, and all creativity can happen from the white walls of the space. We have to come up with all the ideas for the creative sets and the concepts and the backgrounds. And it's enormously exciting to come. And obviously Carl came to the studio as well. And she was able to see materials that we put out and processes of how we capture jewelry there.
Yeah, I want to get into the fact that there's a lot of gemological savoir-faire that is in your mind that helps create the images that you craft for brand campaigns and so forth. So tell the people a little bit about how you got up to speed with the nature of different types of gems and gemstone cuts, inclusions, etc., etc.
Gemstones are fascinating. You have to imagine that if you're interested in a subject, my subject is light. If you're interested in trying to really maximize a subject, you have to go to all degrees of appreciating that subject. And I stumbled across jewelry and gemstones. I had no intention of actually joining this world. And it answered all of my prayers and questions. There is something about the complications of lighting jewelry, lighting gemstones. If you think of metal and its reflections, and also all the different types of metal finishes, whether it's brushed or shiny or matte, how you have to represent that with light to show its material. Then you think of gemstones, which come in all shapes, colors, sizes. They all have their different complications. Some are very included, and the jewelers don't want to show the inclusions. Other stones have huge amounts of inclusions, and that's why the stone is celebrated. So how do you know how to light those particular pieces? How do you understand also that, say for example, a sapphire, a blue sapphire could be a Ceylon sapphire, and it's worth so much per carat. And then suddenly you have a Kashmir or Burmese sapphire, which is worth so much more per carat. You have to understand exactly how to light it and how to capture it and how to represent it, so you can translate to the person looking at the picture the actual intrinsic value of that stone.
Yeah, and the qualitative differences of certain important gemstones that you capture in your photography give it power.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I was just talking to Axel at Wild and Pest, who I've known for many years, and we were discussing how with their stones you can see they're not cut in Sri Lanka, they're all cut in Ida Oberstein.
Yeah,
There is a way of seeing that if you handle the stone. My images of those stones have to say these are German cut. It's incredibly important.
Right, and I think it might be worth you talking about scale and how you handle, because some of the stones, as we all know, there can be very beautiful, important gemstones that are relatively small.
Yeah.
And talk about that, because that is somewhat of a mystery to me, even though I'm also a photo editor and have done a lot of gemological photo editing.
And to me, it's one of the most important parts of my job. And also, I think something that sets me apart from other still life photographers. There are some really talented still life photographers out there, but I think one of the most important parts of being a jewellery photographer is purely understanding scale. You have to obviously know the material you're photographing, but how to give it that sense of scale, that size, that relatability. If you think of a ring fits on a set this size, and if you put it on a set any bigger, then you're going to lose the sense of scale. So how do you put the whole world, everything you're trying to say, all movement, all background, all texture, all tone, how do you put it in a scale that is that size? A necklace is an A4 sheet of paper. So this would be a necklace. And it's got to fit, say if you're doing a campaign for a brand, the set has to translate where you can look at the ring and you know its scale in relation to the necklace by purely looking at the set. And that's amazing. It's very cool. Anyway, the ring went before I realized it's too late to say.
Yeah.
But scale and set is so important in trying to place a piece. And you would know with this picture, for example, that there are feathers and how large it would be in relation to the feathers. But you have to be able to translate the size and show exactly, you are always communicating with a customer. And brands have to show their pieces to a customer, or gemologists have to show their stones to a customer without them actually handling it. And yes, sometimes images are accompanied by measurements, but to actually have a sense of a piece and to feel like you're holding it and picking it up without actually seeing the real object, it has to be sexy and exciting, but it also has to be understandable. You have to know the product you're looking at.
And tell us about how you have to use some stagecraft, so to speak, to stage these stones in such a way so that you can bring out their inherent vitality. Like you use monofilament fishing line and things like that, right? Like, talk about that, because it's sort of almost like you're a set designer or a...
Completely.
Yeah.
So I would say the last thing I do is take a picture. The whole job is what goes before the camera. In my studio, the camera sits on a stand. I do not hold it. I touch it to take the picture and to focus it, but that is it. Everything that happens is before the camera. The real joy of still life is that you're not bound by movement or by human touch. You can create any environment in the world, and you have no limits, really. You can put it anywhere in the world from the studio. It's really fun. So with that, you have to rely on lighting as well. So my studio is in the dark, it's underground, there's nothing there. That smoke is made by a vape. And to actually have a sense of smoke, you have to introduce it. Yeah, it's really fun. But to have that sense of scale and size, and then the environment, which is what we're talking about, you need to really handle light and manage light in a way where you can understand every stone, you can see how it's cut, how it's made, and every stone has a different lighting recipe.
How long do you study a stone? Do you just sort of do the heavy, long, deep dive? I mean, are we talking you'll stare at it for a half an hour, an hour? What are we talking about?
I mean, every situation's different.
Right.
I think the word is conversation. You have to have a conversation with the stone. What it is like doing a portrait of someone.
So the stone tells you what to do with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if you were a portrait photographer, you would research your subject.
Yeah.
You have to have done the research on the stones. You have to understand what they're trying to tell you. Every stone has a different energy. Every stone has a different sense of identity. And you have to be able to capture that and be able to light it. often in a day I'm given many pieces of jewelry to photograph. And therefore the luxury of being able to really study a piece is missing, because obviously this is a commercial job.
Right.
But I do commissions occasionally where I'm given particular stones just to study and to get the best possible image of. And so I love to invent.
So that's a
lighting
wonderful
styles.
opportunity for artistic expansion.
Oh, completely.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay, we are drowning 24/7 in a sea of visual imagery. I'm sure that people in the audience want to know more about, like, how do you do things like, have they shown the photo yet of your octopus earrings?
It's coming.
Is that coming? Okay,
It's coming.
so why don't you talk about how your subject backgrounds and so forth, the other things in the picture can make the jewelry, because Leo also does a lot of antique jewelry and finished jewelry that's contemporary.
Well,
Talk about that.
It's a great and really broad question. I'll try and break it up. I'll start with antique jewelry, really. So every year I have to photograph certain catalogues for antique jewelry brands, and they have to be really eye-catching and beautiful and contemporary, and yet different to last year. If you imagine with antique jewelry, you have so many different eras, designers, materials, price points, all of which, certainly the way we work, it has to be tied into a little brochure, a little booklet, where everything has, some synergy between the previous pictures. So coming up with the backgrounds and ideas, you have to make sure that there is a visual language which is true to the brand which you're photographing, because also, obviously, these antique jewelry brands, they have their own identities, even if the jewelry looks so different. So you have to be true to that.
Right, because they have their specialist areas.
They have their narrative, yeah.
Like some dealers have really great stock from the 19th century. Some
Yeah.
are great Art Deco, some are...
Or some are just really broad and they try and sell you everything. And you have to really understand their visual language to sell their
So
product.
how do you research their visual language?
Conversation. Obviously, every company has a history, unless they're new, and that's a whole other challenge. But through conversation, you're working with people, they're humans. But what I would say, going back to the first point of your question, is as jewelry brands, you have the most amazing luxury of social media, which is, if you think about beforehand, photographers like me were commissioned to photograph that seminal campaign once or twice a year for a brand, and that image would end up in a magazine, or it'd end up on a billboard, and it would be an image that was repeated through magazines through several cycles, and you become used to seeing the one image of the brand.
Right.
Now you have people who are waiting in a line at the supermarket and they can't be bothered to wait, so they have to look at Instagram. They'll be sitting on the bus, they might be on the toilet, they might be anywhere, and they are scrolling through their phone, absorbing images and information. It is the most fantastic opportunity for brands to hit them with a product. How do you do that? With eye-catching, beautiful, detailed imagery. And it has to be done incredibly well. Not only that, you can hit them several times with different images of the same piece of jewelry and still keep it fresh.
And that's really cool.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And you can hit them so many different times. You can make them so overwhelmingly familiar with your brand identity. You can make them familiar with your product. And it's not like in the olden times where people walk past a shop and want to go in because they've seen something in the window. Instagram is now the shop window.
Correct.
So now people will come to your shop, they'll come to your business, they'll look you up online. They might even buy something online without even looking at your shop, just because it's caught their attention and they like it.
Absolutely. Which leads me to a question. I'm very curious to know, why is still life photography your métier as opposed to jewelry, being modeled? Although you did have a swan wearing something, which I thought was quite cool.
And there will be a couple of model pictures coming up. Well, there's a hand.
There you go.
This is a perfect example. The complication.
But that's really cool.
That was for the Easter Bunny. That was an Easter campaign. The real complication with using a human, actually there's several complications, but the one I think I want to focus on is the sense of scale. If you have a human, you have to have the hand, which means you need the wrist or the shoulder, or that you have a torso. If it's an earring, you have to have... Yeah, you like
or
those
the
ones.
octopus.
Or the octopus. You have to have this sense of who the human is and scale. You lose that intimacy with the piece of jewelry. Also, you somewhat have to relate to the model wearing the piece of jewelry, which in this modern day is also another complication, because what message are you trying to say about your brand? Because humanity is not as uncomplicated as it used to be. With still life imagery, you can have the sense of movement of a piece. You can show how it fits in with an environment, but you do not need to have that human to exhibit the piece. To me, you can get so much closer. You can see that's a Golconda diamond. It's absolutely fantastic. You can see it because it's a still life and you're close in. Whereas if you were to be, if it were sitting on a model's hand and she's sitting in some particular pose, you're going to miss the true story of that, and possibly that connection which ends up making the consumer want to buy it.
I'm curious to know how difficult it is for you to come up with new forms and concepts. Do you spend like several hours a day just kind of experimenting with things? Like, for instance, Leo, I don't know how familiar the audience is with your work, but you will use a white background, but because of the way you light it, talk about that, how the stone can then create these incredible effects of like sort of chromatic intensity. Talk about that.
So that particular series, that is, I love designing new ways of lighting. And there are so many spectrums of light which we do not talk about or appreciate. Refracted light is incredibly valuable.
If I can butt in, so much jewelry photography just looks like line sheet product photography to me, because it's like, come on.
To me, a successful image, you feel like you can take the piece out and try it on.
Yeah.
Like you have to have that tangible essence of the piece.
But talk about how, like, there could be like a white background, but all of a sudden it becomes...
Well, because stones have a magical property of being able to show color and light. Even white diamonds, you can get to show amazing color. And gradients,
Gradations.
Yeah, totally. No, there's a huge amount you can do with lighting, which I'm still exploring. I mean, that is the real joy of my job. Is my studio is like a laboratory, and I'm playing every single day with my toys. It's really fun. And, this, for example, Corichet Barney, she came to me and wanted to photograph. She said, I don't want the normal Leo Bieber look. And so I had to ask her, hang on, what do you mean? What is the Leo Bieber look? That is clay. So amazing slices of different clays, which actually over 10 years ago, she came to me and said, I want to do this idea. And then we never did it. And this was only last November, December. We photographed these for her new collection, which is really fun. But you can put jewelry anywhere and everywhere, and it looks fantastic. And that is the joy.
This leads me also to ask about getting back to an example of, we were talking about how lockdown during the COVID era influenced jewelry buying and shopping and so forth. Do you want to relate that story about...
Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah.
So it was for an auction house, and we were supposed to photograph March 2020, the new campaign for this amazing
and
sale.
that was when everything was going crazy and people were freaking out.
And so it was just before then, and we were going to photograph on reeded glass, which was a concept I came up with, and you could some amazing possibilities with this wonderful textured glass.
It's opaque, right? Light can go...
No, it's transparent, but it's mottled, and you can put things in front and behind. And
right, okay.
It was going to be really, really cool. It's been done a lot since, actually, but it would have been really cool. Then suddenly the shoot was cancelled, because the shoot was actually the 23rd of March. Which was when Britain went into lockdown.
Yeah.
So that was cancelled. And then September, October 2020, they came back to me and said, look, we want to now do that shoot, please. And it occurred to me that, no, we cannot do that shoot, because everyone has been looking through glass for the last 5 months. No one is
staring out the window for the past...
No one's going to want to look at jewellery that way. And so I had been actually through lockdown playing with iridescence and this wonderful material, which I had created. And I proposed it to them saying, can we please photograph like this? A campaign which was so different to their usual aesthetic, but obviously you had to change.
What was the material that you created?
They were layers and layers of iridescence, which I managed to put in a particular way where the actual items of jewellery were reflected multiple times down, but the
and there's a
reflections
great
were different
depth of
colours.
field. There's a great depth of field
but the jewellery
in that
sits
imagery.
on top so nicely. They might be coming. I don't know if they've come already, but I'll point them out when they do. anyway, it was a record sale. It was absolutely fantastic. And I don't think it started the trend. I think it was part of the trend.
But that was also, people were so excited to see something that was so colorful and beautiful.
I think so.
And it was great because it made people in the auction world feel more confident about,
I think so.
yeah, people still want to buy jewelry.
Yeah, totally. And it looked
Yeah.
amazing. It was printed really high up in the doorway of, the facade of Bonhams. And it looked
Excellent.
amazing. It looked really fantastic. And it caught people's eye.
So for people in the audience, you have many ideas to offer about how you can, how others can technically improve their
Totally.
photography. So why don't we use the closing minutes to let you impart your wisdom,
Yeah, totally.
the wizardry and the wisdom.
Well, who here tries to take pictures with their iPhone every day?
Raise your hands. Come on.
Yeah, you photograph your jewelry. And there are many, many complications, I imagine. So I made a list, which I will read out, which I think are the most important factors of how to photograph with your iPhones. I can't promise you're going to get pictures like mine because they require something a little bit more than an iPhone. But some of them are really simple ideas. So, for example, who here cleans their lens before they take a picture? Really, really, really important. How do you look at light? And actually, we haven't spoken about light at all, but light really is the most crucial element of photographing any matter, but especially jewelry. The reason why, going back to the sapphire and its origins and where it's from, how do you show a true blue? How do you show the true blue to that particular stone? If you're sitting here, for example, and you have these lights, but then you have the influence of light coming from outside and the light coming from the projector behind, you are having mixed light, which means you will never show true color. If, however, you have a singular light source, you can immediately start being able to show color.
So it's about channeling one light source
Yeah,
in the direction of the subject.
totally. And observing your surroundings, understanding how when light hits an object, is it creating a shadow? What color is it giving? You know, there's so many ways of looking at it. And those two things immediately will improve your iPhone photography. Immediately. It's incredibly important. What I would say, because you guys aren't studio photographers, is to prioritize natural light. And there are ways of actually photographing with an iPhone where and all smartphones, where if you get a white piece of paper and you focus your phone on the white piece of paper before you put the piece of jewelry there, and you hold your finger down, it'll lock the exposure of the phone and then the color tones as well, which means you'll get true color, and therefore you can therefore photograph your pieces of jewelry. I have to say, once you've all done this, you're still going to want to call me because you're going to realize it's a little bit harder than this. But anyway, I have a list, and if anyone is interested in wanting to know what else is on the list, I'm very happy to pass it over. And then you can have my little manual for how to photograph jewelry with your iPhone.
I wanted to ask also, are there any books that you've published that people can buy or order or...
So I've worked a lot with the gemologist Doris Hangartner, and we've got a book on the Prima tourmaline and a new book called Gem Love Letters, where I photographed stones in a lighting design that I created, which is what you were saying, where the stones are against a white background, but all the images are so deep and full and saturated with color, because I was able to light the stones from inside.
And they're almost like layered with, almost like the way, like a Napoleon pastry is layered, you know, with...
Oh, they're really saturated, beautiful images.
There's depth and there's texture and there's like materiality.
Hopefully all my images.
To an image. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I do love to layer. And I do think that with still life, layering images, like the ones you're seeing now, you have so much more of an environment in a world where you are still prioritizing the piece of jewelry. You have to remember, the jewelry is the most important part of the picture. Nothing else. It has to be the jewelry, but then it has to have the story. You know, that feels like it's a wedding. It's an engagement. It's a bridal collection. It has to say that. But what you really look at and what you really see is the jewelry. And that is the most important part, is how you show and how you light the jewelry.
Excellent. Do we have time for questions? Can we do that? Would anybody? Okay. Oh, wait. Someone's coming over with the mic.
Hello.
Hello.
You always work with permanent light or your flash? Always?
So I trained as a flash photographer, as a flash assistant to a photographer. When I was first actually writing what I was going to say, I have a whole bit, which I'll talk to you afterwards about the differences between flash and continuous lighting. You cannot, and I have tried, you cannot get the results that I get with stones and jewellery with flash. You can't. My process is very peculiar. You cannot buy equipment which does what I have in my pictures. I create and make all the equipment that I photograph with other than the camera.
There's this hand-fabricated, sorry to speak over you, but the thing, a strong differentiating factor, I think, is this notion of sort of like hand fabrication. You're almost building tools and
They're
building
hand-painted.
materials. And yeah.
I hand paint the light. So there is no equipment which you can buy on the market which will get these results that I have in my images. Flash, although incredibly useful for so many subjects within photography, with jewellery it nukes it. You don't have that control. You can't get the depth of shadow that I get. Fantastic question, by the way.
Thank you.
Thank you.